مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. ألقى دونالد ترامب أول خطاب له من خطابات حالة الاتحاد، وهو أهم خطاب يلقيه الرئيس كل عام. إن كنت من أنصار الرئيس فقد سمعت اختفاء بقوة الاقتصاد الأمريكي وأرضاً ساخياً بالتوصل إلى حل وسط حول القضايا الخلافية مثل الهجرة والأمن الحدود، والالتزاما بمواجهة التهديدات العالمية باتباع سياسة إخلال السلام من خلال القوة. أما إن كنت من منتقدي الرئيس فقد سمعت خطابا حقودا مثيرا للفرقة زاد من مخاوف خيال الإجانب في بلادنا، وراهن مسير أطفال المهاجرين الأبرياء بخطة الرئيس لبناء جدار حدودي، وزعما عن كل ما هو جميل في أمريكا الفضل فيه يعود إلى ترامب، وكل ما هو قبيح السبب فيه سلفه. إجمالا كانت بداية ملائمة لعام 2018، وهو عام بدأ بمعركة نتج عنها إغلاق الحكومة الفيدرالية، وسينتهي بالانتخابات ستحدد من سيسيطر على الكونغرس وربما مصير إدارة ترامب نفسها. لمناقشة خطاب حالة الاتحاد والعام السياسي المقبل، يسرني أن أرحب باثنين من العقول السياسية اللامعة، نورمان أورنستين وترينت دافي. Welcome to Dakhel, Washington. President Trump delivered his first State of the Union address, the most important speech a president gives each year, setting out the agenda and setting the tone for his administration. Gentlemen, Norm, Trent, let's take a look at what the president said and what he meant. Trent, first of all, your overall impressions, positive, negative, of the president's speech.
I think it was a mixed bag. The president starts with very low approval ratings. He has very strong support among his Republican base, but he went through a litany of agenda items. I would call it a kitchen sink kind of approach to a State of the Union. But I think overall it was, give it a B+ in terms of the grade. His guests were very good. And I think he tried to set the tone, at least tried to put the ball back in the Democrats' court in terms of bipartisanship on immigration and infrastructure. So he's trying to reach out his hand. It's a new thing for him. We'll see what happens.
So, Norm, we heard a B+. Is that grade inflation or an accurate assessment?
I would not give it quite so high a grade, to tell you the truth. But if you look at the substance of the speech, and I certainly agree with Trent that he used the guests that he had brilliantly. He went through his victory lap, which every president does, but he vastly exaggerated his own impact. He took enormous credit, for example, for the decline in black unemployment. 8/9 of it came during the Obama years. He had just the tail end of it. What I found quite striking, though, was that when he got to what was the road ahead, there was an overwhelming focus again on immigration, but it was not an open invitation to a real compromise. It was a hard line. And infrastructure, which you would think would be the one area, was right from the beginning of the presidency where you could find broad bipartisan agreement. He spent 20 seconds on it most. No plan, no indication that he was going to engage in give and take with Democrats. So I did not come out of it with a sense that we have a legislative road ahead, and we do have a debt ceiling vote, more potential for government shutdowns, a lot of problems that were not really addressed, much on foreign policy except for North Korea.
All right, so we have a different view. Let's take a look at some of the key items on the agenda. First, the economy. President Trump certainly celebrated the strength of the American economy, which I think all Americans recognize. How much of it is President Trump's doing, and is he right to claim a lot of the credit for it?
Well, any president's going to take credit for a good economy. That's just the way the system works. But I do think that the president is right to claim some credit for the rise of the Dow. For the other accomplishments, look, he did get a Supreme Court justice seated. He did get a huge tax cut passed through the Congress. These are things that have been tried and failed for a generation. So he got to take credit where credit is due. He failed on a lot of his attempts, but now he's coming back. Immigration, infrastructure, and even prescription drugs, which is a typical Democrat issue. So you see him shifting back to his election year campaign-style rhetoric that got him into the White House.
So isn't that right? If the Democratic candidate had been elected, chances are unlikely the stock market would be as high as it is today?
Oh, I think that's absolutely the case. The stock market went up very substantially in anticipation of a big tax cut, which was going to be tilted very heavily towards corporations. They got what they wanted. Now, whether that continues, since a lot of it was in anticipation of that, remains to be seen. So whether Americans are going to celebrate that remains to be seen. Now, the economy, which had begun to build in strength over the last 2 or 3 years, recovering from the global recession that followed the financial collapse in 2008, has continued along. Some of it is the private sector, some of it is the fact that the administration hasn't blown a lot of things up. What happens if it continues is a real question of whether the sugar high from the tax cut collapses and when that happens. But also, when you take credit for the Dow going up, what happens when the Dow goes down? Who's going to get the blame for it?
You're shaking your head on this.
Well, look.
Except the last point, you probably agree with.
Let's talk about working Americans. Wages are up. You cannot disagree with that. That is an iron fact. Wages are up. The unemployment rate is way down.
Yeah.
More Americans are working today than have been in a long time. You're right. The president's going to ride the wave when he does.
Yeah.
And Obama deserves some of the credit for it. But Trump and his administration just deserve some more credit. They passed the tax cut. They've also cut a lot of regulations that have interfered with a lot of small business activity and entrepreneurialism. And the economy is cooking right now. And the president is one factor in that. I agree with you. He's a small factor, but all the indicators are strong.
Yeah, the economy certainly is moving along pretty well right now. You know, we'll see what happens in terms of most Americans. We do know that revenues are hemorrhaging as a result of the tax cut, and they've actually had to move up the date when our debt ceiling is going to be reached by a month just in the last couple of days. We also know that while wages are up, they're not exactly soaring for average people. The promise of the tax cut was that corporations getting all this additional money would turn a very substantial share of it back to their employees.
But Apple just announced that they're going to spend $250 billion in the United States. That is a massive investment in the United States of America. There are all sorts of announcements like that. Companies are giving bonuses to their employees. Companies are hiring, they're raising wages, and they're bringing things over. So that is directly attributable to repatriation and some of the things that the corporate tax cut did, because the United States was way behind the rest of the world when it came to the taxation of corporations. That's why American companies went overseas in the first place, to escape the ridiculous levels of taxation that they faced here. So that's happening. That's not the president. The White House doesn't decide what Apple does with its money. Apple does. $250 billion, that is a massive, massive program that Obama could only dream about in terms of investment in the country.
All right, I'd like to move on to what was in many ways the centerpiece of the State of the Union address, which was immigration and border security, the whole package. This was the package that stymied Congress and led to the government shutdown just a few weeks ago. And we'll find out whether it still stymies them and leads to another government shutdown before too long. Now, one of the ideas the president did put on the table were words that one would have thought this president never would have uttered. Citizenship for a certain number. He said 1.8 million. We'll find out if that's actually the number. Illegal, undocumented immigrants. Is this a major move from the president? Is this expected, or is this less than meets the eye?
What the president did was to give a package that he said was fundamentally non-negotiable. It included the one carrot of 1.8 million. That includes 800,000 Dreamers and their immediate family members with a 12-year path to citizenship. That is different than what we've seen before.
Trent, do you think what the president offered in terms of path to citizenship is a deal changer?
I think it's the farthest the president has gone in a public setting. And for him to do that in the State of the Union was huge. If he had tried to do that in the Republican primaries 1 year ago, Trump, would have called it amnesty. So for him to go from where he was to win the Republican nomination to what he said on Tuesday night before the United States, giving 1.8 million Dreamers a path to citizenship, that is a big step in the direction for the Democrats. And they need to decide whether they want to make a deal or not. It was very close 2 weeks ago before there was a shutdown, but there's going to be other bumps in the road that they're going to have to come to a deal. And I think, the Democrats might just have to take yes for an answer and get this behind us and move on.
And how will citizenship affect core supporters of the president?
Well, that is an open question. We don't know the answer to that, and that we're sitting here now in February. There were not, the elections are in November, so a lot can happen between now and then. It's all about intensity, and the political gamble, I think, is for Republicans to get this behind them. Let's move on. Let's move on to other things that we can agree on, and let's move forward.
Okay, when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about the other part of the immigration border security debate. Will we actually build a wall along the Mexico border? In just a moment. Again, our guests today include Norman Ornstein. Norm is resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and one of America's wisest experts on politics, Congress, and the presidency. A native of the great state of Minnesota, he is a contributing editor and columnist for National Journal and the Atlantic magazines, and an election analyst for BBC News. Sitting to his left is Trent Duffy. Trent has 20 years' experience in media relations, strategic communication, and public affairs, and has served in top positions in the White House, on Capitol Hill, and with major corporations. He served in the George W. Bush White House for 4 years, including as Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Press Secretary. Prior to working in the White House, Trent served as Communications Director for the White House Office of Management and Budget, Press Secretary for the Republican National Committee, and worked for 2 congressmen and was spokesperson for New Jersey Governor Christie Todd Whitman's successful re-election campaign. All right, so let's look at the other piece of immigration border security, the wall. Will there be a wall built with congressional funding along the U.S.-Mexico border? Norm.
Well, one of the more interesting and amusing dynamics of the last couple of weeks was that when John Kelly, the president's chief of staff, went on a television news program and said, there won't really be a wall, we're going to have a fence for part of it, we'll use our smart communications for others. If we get something resembling a wall, in part because of physical barriers, rivers and others, in part because you're going to have to take away land from a lot of Texans, including many conservative Republicans, to build that wall, it's likely to be a hodgepodge that doesn't go across the entire border anyhow, and the odds that Mexico will pay for any of it, if we do get something that's done as part of an immigration deal, are slim to none.
All right, Trent, how do you see this?
Well, I think this goes back to what we were discussing earlier. The Democrats are going to define what works in terms of the path to citizenship for the Dreamers. The Democrat Party and the Democrat extremists are going to define that. The Republicans are going to have to define what actually qualifies as a wall or not. If Trump says it's a wall and his base believes it, then it's a wall. If Democrats say that 1.8 million or 2 million dreamers coming into the U.S. and having a path to citizenship is a good deal on immigration, then it works. It's all a political calculation. It has nothing to do with fact. It has nothing to do with money or anything else. It's all just what the base believes on both sides.
So when you look at the package that the president laid out, border security, ending family migration, ending the visa lottery, dreamer, path to citizenship, in general, is this a package that's going to get through Congress?
Boy, that is a very good question, and no one knows the answer. I think the reactions from some of the hardliners on the Republican side, like Steve King and others, was actually fairly muted, which I was surprised to see, because I thought, given his open hand to 1.8 million dreamers coming in, path to citizenship, I thought that would be kind of a dead bang loser in terms of the Congress. So I thought the reaction was pretty good. Whether the Democrats are going to take the deal, the Republicans in the White House are kind of playing the same card they did during the shutdown. Like, this is a very good deal. You have to take yes for an answer. We'll see if the Democrats overplay their hand. Because remember, it was the Democrats in the middle in the Senate that are running in states that Trump won who finally caved on the budget agreement the last time. They'll do the same again.
Norm, does this make a deal?
No. The caving the last time was over 3 weeks of an extension before we could get to a point. There's a difference between the Democratic base and the Republican base. The Republican base will believe anything Donald Trump says. The Democratic base, including Hispanic voters, will not accept this deal. Steve King may have been lukewarm. That will tell you something about the nature of the deal. It's a deal which may or may not provide a path to citizenship for 1.8 million out of the 12 million who are here. But it shuts the door on legal immigrants coming in from a lot of places, including other countries. And it means that the 10 million others are going to be subject to the same kind of deportation that we've seen ICE, the Immigration Service, do in a very vicious way up till now. So this is
you don't
not
think
the
there's
making.
a deal, though?
There is no deal there. If there's a deal, it's likely to be the one that Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader of the Senate, proposed to the president before, which is, we'll give you $20 billion for the wall. You just give us the Dreamer extension through legislation for 6 years. Let them stay here in the way that they are. It doesn't necessarily mean
smaller
citizenship.
deal.
A smaller deal.
Trent, what do you think?
I just disagree. I mean, I think that again, the Democrats in states that Trump won don't want to go there. They realize that their own seats in the Senate are not worth losing because of a vote about immigration. Yes, Republicans have all the levers of power, but Norm, come on. The Senate is a jump ball. Senate Democrats
Jump ball meaning it's basically equal.
Yes.
Basically equal.
Yes.
51-49.
It's yes, absolutely. It is a very close vote in the Senate, and Senate Democrats have a lot of leverage. And look, Donald Trump is not governing as a ideologue. He is offering some very bipartisan opportunities for Democrats to seize. It's just like George W. Bush did when I worked for him. It was kind of the same kind of package. It didn't pass muster with the Republicans at that time, but Donald Trump basically asked the Democrats to come with him and give him the votes to make it work.
You know, we had a deal, a very good deal that Senate Democrats and Republicans have worked out, and the fact is Donald Trump would have signed that deal. The problem that Trump has is on immigration, he is being driven by John Kelly and Stephen Miller in the White House, and they are rank nativists, anti-immigration, by Tom Cotton and Steve King, people who want to throw all of the immigrants from unsavory countries out of the country as rapidly as possible and then shut the doors on any except highly educated ones.
That's simply not true. That's complete hyperbole. That is complete hyperbole. I mean, you cannot say things like that. That is just not true.
What's not true about it?
They want to throw people out of the country based on wherever they're from. That is just simply not true, Norm. You know that.
If you look at what Tom Cotton
There's a
has
legal
said,
system of immigration in this country that this government follows. It's been held up by the courts time and time again, and they are following a path that has been laid out. And Tom Kelly is not a nativist. He's a bureaucrat that's worked in the halls of government for his entire career.
If you look at John Kelly's performance at the Department of Homeland Security, where it was supposed to be, we're going to prioritize.
And how many Senate Democrats voted for Mr. Kelly to be the Secretary of Homeland Security?
Oh, they did, and I don't think they expected what they got.
Oh, okay.
But
all right.
The willingness to take 10 million or more people who are here illegally and get rid of them, if that's not throwing people out of the country, Trent, I don't know what is.
They are here illegally. You're absolutely right.
Let me ask you a different question, gentlemen. This is fascinating. Our viewers love to see true democracy at work. In all of this, in all the President's State of the Union, was there an important domestic issue that you were surprised didn't come up, that you expected the President to talk about, that he decided, you know what, I'm not going there?
To me, no. I think to Norm's point, it was an hour and a half. It was kind of like Khrushchev banging his shoe on the table. He covered it. It was the kitchen sink.
No, I think he covered everything. There were a couple of interesting moments. One was when he talked about providing a lot of federal aid for retraining. That was one area where Democrats applauded more than Republicans.
Obviously, there's one topic that didn't come up in the State of the Union, which is the investigations hovering over the White House. For obvious reasons, did not come up. But in your view, how do you think that is affecting the daily operations, the decision-making process of the White House? You've been in a White House, you've watched these White Houses operate. How does something as massive and as ominous as this affect the daily operations?
I don't think it really affects this White House that much. I mean, there are people that are focused on it. The president has his lawyers, but in investigations like this, the White House gets very siloed. So the president's attorneys deal with the investigation. And I think, frankly, the longer this goes on, the more it becomes really ridiculous and supports Donald Trump's point that there's no there there. If Director Mueller had any issues, he should bring it forward. He should get to the bottom of it. This has been going on for a year. And the longer it goes, the worse it becomes for the Democrats. We have so many investigations. It's not just the FBI. It's not just the special counsel. We have the Democratic Senate. We have the Democrats in the House Intelligence Committee doing the exact same thing. They haven't turned anything up. If they have something, please show it to us.
Norm?
We're going to see this be a top issue. I think it's affecting the White House more than Trent suggests, and that's partly because having been up close with a lot of the things that went on, for example, in the Clinton administration, some of the things in the Reagan administration surrounding the Iran-Contra affair, everybody is nervous. And when you have people called in front of a grand jury, and that includes staffers making very little money who then have to hire lawyers, you have a nervousness of who might turn next. It takes a lot of time. And we know from reports from inside the White House that the president vents about this all the time. And probably 80% of his tweets now, and they're frequent tweets, are related to the investigation. So it's certainly preoccupying.
Well, I just love that
I
just love that my Democrat friends who loved the fact that J. Edgar Hoover was a terrible, awful man at the FBI now all of a sudden think the FBI is completely the greatest thing on the earth. The same people that love the release of the Pentagon Papers don't like the release of information that the American people have a right to know. I mean, it is unbelievable, and I appreciate you switching hats.
I'm afraid that we really did run out of time. I apologize. We're going to have to continue this conversation. It sounds to me like we have a lot more to talk about. So thank you very much, Trent. Thank you, Norm. And thank you for joining us in Dakhel, Washington. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول جانب السياسة الخارجية من خطاب حالة الاتحاد، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhura.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.